Teyvat as a place is extremely old. The story and history of Genshin Impact spans over many centuries and even millennia. Because of this, many of those who call Teyvat home can range wildly in terms of age, from humans who barely reach a century in their lifetime to the Adepti who can easily reach thousands. But despite this large disparity, there are beings that go far beyond this. So in this video, let's talk about some of the oldest beings that exist in Teyvat today. Before we dive into that, if you want to see more Genshin Impact content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's establish some ground rules first. Firstly, this list will only have 4 characters, or rather groups, which isn't an arbitrary number and will make sense in a bit. I'm sure there are many who deserve a place on this list, but I don't want to make this video super long, so I'll be sticking to only 4. Secondly, because the gap in age between different species can vary so wildly, I'll only include 1 entry from each race. If I didn't do this, then half this list may well just be the archons. Finally, oldest here means how long they have actually been alive, and not how old their current form looks. Barbatos, for example, is thousands of years old, but in the body of essentially a young adult. So with those rules out of the way, let's start with the oldest from the human race, which funnily enough is the youngest on this list. Without a doubt, the oldest person from the human race is likely Farzan, who is well beyond 100 years old. Farzan lived in the distant past in Sumeru and was one of its most prolific scholars. Her area of expertise was the language of Deshret's empire that specifically related to the functioning of the civilization's machines and equipment. During an expedition, Farzan was caught in a secret room in one of Deshret's ruins. While the room contained many important archaeological finds, from detailed manuscripts to complex machinery, it was also covered in somewhat of a stasis field, which preserved these artifacts. When Farzan entered the room, she mistakenly got herself trapped. The stasis field prevented her from dying, but the mechanisms of the room were incredibly complex, and she couldn't find a way out. This caused her to spend a really long time in the room deciphering its mechanisms before finally solving its puzzle and escaping. She spent several years, if not decades, trapped here, as when she came out, everything had changed. It's also important to note that it wasn't like she was put to sleep or anything, she was completely conscious the entire time. So Farzan in the current day is at least 100 years old despite still looking very young. If you want to know her story in more detail, you can check out a video I made about her lore that I'll leave in the card up here. Next up, we'll talk about the oldest magical being that exists in Teyvat. These are basically the non-humans, such as the Adepti, the Yokai, and whatever race Klee happens to be. Now earlier I mentioned that I'll be covering only 4 characters, but that's not entirely accurate. I felt that it wouldn't be truly encompassing if I omitted this particular group, but each of these characters vary largely between them in terms of age. For example, from the Adepti group, characters like Cloud Retainer is easily 3,500 years old, while the Yokai like Yaimiko is only around 500. Klee's mom Alice is also around that age as well, said to be around 500 years old. So among the magical beings, these characters are some of, if not the oldest we know so far, but in the interest of time, I won't expand on each of their laws specifically. Next up, we have the gods themselves. Right now, the oldest god that we know of is Morax, the archon of Liyue. While most of the archons are several hundred years old, Morax is without a doubt the oldest. He is easily said to be around 6,000 years old, making him far older than even the magical beings we just talked about. Morax has been around even before the events of the Archon Wars and was killing gods in the region of Liyue before Liyue Harbor even existed. He had established 2 different major cities by the time of the main story and had led both these places for an incredibly long amount of time. This is why he currently works as a consultant in the Wangsheng funeral parlor, as he remembers every rite and tradition that exists going back even before the founding of Liyue Harbor itself. His extreme age is also why he has chosen to retire from the role of Archon, as he wishes that the people of Liyue could chart their own paths. Finally, we reach the oldest character we have met in-game. While Morax being 6,000 years old is considered to be already really old, Apep, who we met recently, has existed even before the primordial one came to Teyvat. In the past, Teyvat was once ruled by the dragons, and the continents or even planets were largely different from what we know today. It was only after the Primordial One came and defeated the dragons that we have the Teyvat we see today. Now just try to imagine this. Apep, who is one of the 7 sovereigns, was alive way before the Archon Wars, before the Archons were even a thing, before even Celestia was around, and even before the Primordial One itself. Apep could very well be millions of years old, being so ancient that it's almost as old as Teyvat itself. In fact, because the Primordial One reshaped Teyvat after winning the war, Apep was around during a time when Teyvat was completely different. It's unclear how old she really is, but just from the fact that she existed prior to the arrival of the Primordial One, makes her one of the oldest characters we have met so far. It's unclear if there are any more ancient beings hiding in the shadows, but for now, Apep will hold the crown for the oldest being we have ever met. Perhaps once we know more about the Sinner or the Dragon King Nibelung, she may eventually be dethroned, but for now, she is without a doubt the oldest we have seen. Much of the story has yet to be revealed though, so just keep in mind that this may well change in the future. But that does it for this video, and if you enjoyed it, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.